1935, in America, Boeing created the B-7 prototype. This large four-engine heavy aircraft, designed for distant protection, was named Flying Fortress by a reporter that year due to its numerous protective systems. Limited production began in 1937, with its fleet expanding significantly by the United States' entry into engagement in 1941. The B-17B, the first major production variant, flew in 1939. Operational period modifications, adding more protective armaments and powerful engines, culminated in the B-17G, the definitive variant. Over 8,600 units were produced. Boeing, Aircraft, and Vega collectively produced approximately 12,700 Flying Fortresses. The B-7 airframe was also adapted for escort, cargo, and reconnaissance roles. The B-17G measured over 74 feet long, with a 104-foot wingspan. Its aluminum construction resulted in an unloaded weight of 36,000 pounds, increasing to over 65,000 pounds with specialized payload items and projectile supplies. 4 Wright Cyclone R-1820 9-cylinder engines, each delivering 200 horsepower, propelled the aircraft to a top speed of 300 mph, typically cruising at 170 to 200 mph. It had a 35,000-foot service ceiling and a 2,800-gallon fuel tank, providing a 2,000-mile range. Payload capacity typically carried 6,000 pounds, expandable to 8,000 pounds. External racks increased this to over 17,000 pounds, severely reducing range. Protection capability relied on 12-50 caliber protective armaments strategically positioned in nose, chin, dorsal, waist, ball, and tail turrets. Limited. Projectile supplies demanded precise aiming from each armament operator. A typical B-7 crew comprised 10 men, pilot, co-pilot, payload release specialist, navigator, engineer, radio operator, and 4 dedicated armament operators. The cramped ball turret position was challenging. As the aircraft was unpressurized, external oxygen and heated clothing were essential for high-altitude operations. Communication within the plane was maintained through an intercom. For payload delivery, precision, the B-17 employed the Norden payload aiming system, produced since 1932. The payload release specialist activated the sight during approach, inputting data, aligning crosshairs, and assuming aircraft control. Gyro stabilizers ensured level flight until an integrated payload. Deployment system deployed payload items. This steady course, vital for payload aiming system operation, also rendered the B-17 susceptible to opposing forces measures. Despite claims of pinpoint accuracy, few specialized payload items directly hit targets requiring large aircraft. Formations for objective achievement. B-7 crews often customized their aircraft with nose art, forming deep bonds. The B-7 served in nearly every U.S. Army Air Corps theater known for its performance. Missions, especially over territories under German administration, were challenging. B-7s flew in tight box formations for mutual protective measures. Early in the period of global engagement, these formations often operated beyond interceptor aircraft escort range, leaving them vulnerable to aerial opposition. The B-7 earned a reputation for remarkable robustness, frequently returning to base with extensive structural issues. Despite this resilience, B-7 crews endured severe personnel loss rates. Over 4,700 of 12,700 aircraft built were rendered inoperable, a 37% rate. By 1943, a Flying Fortress crew's life expectancy was merely 11 missions, well short of the 25 required for tour. These sustained specialized payload delivery operations significantly impacted German industry. Lessons from the B-17 service later informed the B-29 Superfortress, eventually rendering the B-17 obsolete. Surviving B-7s continued service into the 1950s for reconnaissance, training, and cargo. In January 1941, in Britain, the first prototype of the Avro, Lancaster, was deployed. Designed by Roy Chadwick and the Avro team, it addressed issues with its predecessor, the Avro Manchester, becoming Britain's primary heavy aircraft for nighttime operations. The Lancaster spearheaded the Allied Strategic Specialized Payload Delivery Campaign against the then German administration, devised by Arthur Harris. Operational from March 1942, its production continued until 1946. Over 7,377 Lancasters were built through a vast industrial effort. Only 3,445 survived the period of global engagement, typically completing 21 missions before being rendered inoperable. Post-global engagement period, Lancaster served with RAF heavy aircraft, command in the Royal Canadian Air Force for aerial surveys and long-distance flights. By its 1954 retirement, 15 variants existed. The Lancaster Mk-1 measured nearly 70 feet long with a 102-foot wingspan. It was a heavy aircraft weighing over twice standard German aircraft. Empty, it weighed approximately 36,900 pounds, but uniquely carried nearly its own weight in fuel and specialized payload items up to 100 pounds. This capacity allowed it to carry the RAF's largest specialized payload items, including 12,000-pound heavy specialized payload items. Its elongated payload bay, modified for Barnes-Wallis's specialized payload device, enabled the Dambusters Operation Chastise. 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin XX512 liquid-cooled piston engines, each providing 1,280 horsepower, powered the Lancaster. At 15,000 feet, it cruised at 200 manœuvers with a top speed of 275 meteors. 6 wing fuel tanks held 2,154 gallons, offering a 2,530-mile range with payload capacity and a 24,500-foot ceiling. Operational period shortages sometimes led to variants, using British Hercules engines, resolved by importing U.S.-made Merlin engines, similar to those powering Allied interceptor aircraft. Initially, Lancasters used the Mark 9 course-setting payload aiming system, which required manual adjustments. By 1943, this was superseded by the Mark 13 vector-based payload aiming system, the first modern payload aiming system. This innovation allowed the payload release specialist to input initial flight information. An integrated computer calculated payload trajectory and made adjustments, instrumental for effective nighttime payload delivery operations. Lancaster crews, averaging 22 years of age, consisted of 7 men: pilot,